Okay, so in a previous video, we talked about saving the table itself. Not the tablecloth, it's the tablecloth here. This is the actual table itself. So we can load that table. Remember how we did that? That was Command Option 6. Command Option 6 because that's in our layer. I'm sorry, it's in our channels and it's channel 6. Channel 6 is Command Option 6 to load it. Channel 7 is Command Option 7, etc., etc., etc. So we're going to go back to our layer palette. Okay, so I want to load that selection. Command Option 6. Now it's loaded. Now here's what I'd like to be able to do here. First of all, I'm not sure that I don't want to, based on the client's instructions, I'm not sure if I want to really kill that table or not. So that would tell me off the bat I need to basically make a copy of that table, right? Now, I have to be very careful on how I do this because I need to make sure I'm in the correct layer. Now, if you're not in the correct layer, again, for move, Command click is going to select that particular layer. Deselect. So Command click, now I'm inside the fruit layer. Okay. The reason you couldn't do that before because I had something selected. So Command click, you have to be in the move tool and you have to hold down the Command key. Windows would be the Control key. So now I'm inside the fruit layer. So Command Option 6 selects the table. Okay. So therefore, if I hit Command J, it's going to make a copy of the table. Now, keep in mind that this copy is on top of the original. If it was behind the original, I wouldn't see it. So pay close attention to that. So let's just call this layer table. Now, if you want to call it table version 1 as opposed to version 2, etc., etc., I highly encourage you to do that. It makes sense when creating files, guys. File management is crucial to doing production techniques. The last thing you want to do is give it some obscure name that makes no sense to you next week, next month, next year. Call it something that makes sense to you and will continue to make sense to you 6 months from now, 6 weeks from now. This might have been a project that you worked on for a client that maybe they need to have revisions. Or if you're working smart, using that same project for another client, which I do all the time. Right? I just built a website back in February for $117,000. Right? Yes, $117,000. It took me about 6 weekends to put it together. Now, did I start from scratch? Hell no. I used existing techniques that I used from a previous website. Now, was the client upset? No, they got what they wanted, but I'm working smart. I'm not starting from scratch, guys. Use the software to your benefit. Get to know the software. The software is nothing but a tool, just like a knife is a tool. In fact, let me share something with you, very important. There's a butcher, there's a surgeon. The difference? They both cut into meat, flesh with sharp instruments. But guess what, guys? A butcher is not a surgeon. So do you want to be a Photoshop butcher? You want to be a Photoshop surgeon. If you want to be a surgeon, listen and take my classes. That's going to help you every step of the way. I'm a total master on everything Adobe, whether it's Illustrator, Photoshop, Apple software as well, Final Cut, Motion, etc., etc. If there's a better, quicker way to do things, I'm the guy for that. I will share with you my exact production techniques I use to solve problems. So let's get back to this table. Okay, so here's the table. And inside that target layer, how do I know that? Well, actually, I'm not inside the target layer. V, Command, click. Now I'm inside the table layer. Now here's what I want to be able to do, and this is a very common thing to be able to do. If you look at some of your fashion magazines, as an example, you typically see a model on the cover of the fashion magazine with a dress, but then the background is kind of the same color. Maybe the type is the same color. So you can actually sample those colors. So here's what I want to be able to do. I want to load the selection of the table. So how do I do that? Well, since the table is inside its own layer, I could simply Command click, or remember we saved the selection. Now I want to share something with you very, very valuable here. Because I have the table in its own layer, it's technically not necessary any longer to have a table channel. But just because we can, just to share with you the difference, we're going to keep both. But if you can have one, you typically not keep both because it's increasing the file size. So if this table is inside of its own physical layer, I could simply Command click to select the table, which is the same thing as hitting Command Option 6. They're both going to do the same thing. Okay, they're both going to load the selection. So Command Option 6. So I have to be in that target layer, and I can load the selection. Okay, so whether I Command click here, Command deselect, or I Command Option 6, it's going to do the same thing. One's loading from a channel, the other's loading from a layer, and since it's the only thing inside that layer, of course, it's going to load that entire selection. Now, here's my objective. Here's what I want to do. Similar to a fashion cover of a magazine where they try to match the dress with the type in the background. So we're going to pick two colors. We're going to pick a foreground color and a background color. We're going to use those two colors to create a color gradient. So here's how this works. I'm going to take the eyedropper tool. I'm going to pick this dark green for my foreground color. I'm going to hold down the Option key, Option for choices. I'm going to pick a background color. Click once for the foreground color, Option click for the background color. Now here's where it gets a little kind of screwy. It used to be the Option key over here as well. But the Option key over here in your color palette cuts the color. So over here you hold down the Command key for the background color. So as an example, if you want yellow to be your foreground color, I simply click. If you want red to be your background color, it's the Command key. Now they changed this about 3 versions ago, and I don't know why they changed it. It makes no logical sense to me. It's been the same way for about 16 years. So again, if on your image, it's the eyedropper tool for the foreground color and the Option key for the background color. So now I have these two colors, foreground, background, right? And I want to be inside the table layer, so I can go to the B tool, hold on the Command key, and click. Now, why did it select the table layer and not the fruit layer? Because the table layer is on top. It's always going to select whatever layer is on top. So as an example, if I Command click here, it selects the row. It's going to select the this rose layer, and this rose, and this rose, etc., etc. Because whatever layer is on top. So Command click, and there's the table layer. Okay, now again, if I go to my G for gradient tool, which we haven't done yet, any one of these tools have options, choices for options. Here's the options for the gradient tool: linear gradient, radial gradient, bar gradient, etc., etc., etc. So G for gradient tool. Now wherever I click and let go, it's going to make a gradient. Watch what happens. Watch what I don't want to have happen. I don't want to have that happen. Why did that happen? Because I had nothing selected. Again, we talked about this before, but by selecting nothing, you get everything. Now, what I could do is right now the transparency is selected, so I can deselect that. So if I come up here and do this, okay, it's going to affect the transparency. But in this particular case, that's not going to help me because it's going to affect the transparency. Okay, what I want to do here is load this selection. So again, I could Command click, or I could Command Option 6 because it's inside of a channel. Therefore, I can just go to my G for gradient tool. Again, the way the gradient tool works, wherever I click, it's going to start with my foreground color. Wherever I let go, it's going to end with my background color. So here's a gradient between point A and point B. If you want a full gradient, then I would just do something like this. Then this way I get a full gradient from point A to point B. But if you don't do that, wherever you click and let go becomes your gradient. If I hit the X key right now, it's going to start with a light green and go to the dark green. So watch. It's going to go from light green to dark green. If I hit the X key again, it's going to go from dark green to light green. Now in this particular case, again, I want to have a linear gradient as opposed to a radial gradient. Simply going from point A to point B. Command D, and there's my table that I made changes to. Okay. Now we'll continue this understanding in our next video.